3 dead bodies, 3 convicted, 1 sentenced to death. Join us next in the Murder Mafia for Life or Death, the story of Daniel Lee Lewis. Welcome back, Murder Mafia. I am your host, the Podfather, Richard Bystron. With me, as always, my right-hand man, my ace boon coon, my consigliere, my buddy here, Dylan DW. What's going on, pal?
What's up?
So we've got a... Fun is not the right word. I don't know why I ever say fun. We have a fun case for you, because none of these cases are fun, right? And that's just a poor choice of words.
Yeah, it's a pretty poor choice of words.
Hey, Murder Mafia. Before we get too far into today's episode, I have a favor to ask. Wherever you listen to our show, whether it's on TuneIn or Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, or especially Apple, if you can leave us a 5-star rating and a review, what we're going to do for everybody that does that for us is we're going to send you a really cool free Murder Mafia bracelet. And what we're going to do is when you leave that review, just please message me on either the Instagram account at The Murder Mafia or the Facebook page, The Murder Mafia. And for everybody that does that, we're going to send you an individually wrapped bracelet. They're super cool. They're black with white writing. They're just really, really nice little bracelets. Just as a thank you to show you that we care and we really appreciate everything you guys do for us. So leave that review for us. We'll get you free bracelets. And now on to the show. But I don't know if you guys have seen the news. The federal government has decided to reinstate or reinstitute, or I should say, start executing federal prisoners who've been sentenced to death. I believe it's been 17 years since the last federal execution, which in my personal opinion is way too long. We are very pro-death sentence here on the Murder Mafia if you deserve it. And this is going to be the first person but the first person scheduled to die, I believe since 2003 was the last one. So today we're going to talk about Daniel Lee Lewis. He actually has a co-defendant, but the co-defendant, we're going to get into it a little bit. The co-defendant somehow managed to only get a life sentence out of this, which is very confusing, which is also why the family of the victim and many other groups are advocating, even though this guy is as Dylan likes to say, a piece of human trash. Many, many people are advocating that his sentence be commuted to life because the government completely contradicted themselves, and I'm surprised it hasn't been, to be completely honest. So we're going to give you a little bit of background on this. This guy's name, this murderer's name is Daniel Lee Lewis. And the evidence presented at trial showed that Chevy Kehoe, his father Kirby Kehoe, and his brother Cheyenne Kehoe, and Farron Lovelace. So there's actually 5 people involved in the whole corrupt act. Okay, so follow along. So Chevy Kehoe, his father Kirby, brother Cheyenne, and a friend Farron Lovelace participated in a whole variety of criminal activities to promote and fund a white supremacist organization known as the Aryan People's Republic, or the Aryan People's Resistance. Ironically enough, their whole goal was to steal enough money from people to purchase an island in the Pacific Northwest, to have a whites-only island in the Pacific Northwest. Little strange, right, bud?
A little bit.
Excuse me. Kehoe formed the APR, which is what it was known by, like I said, to establish a whites-only Christian identity, faith-based island in the Pacific Northwest. He patterned it after an anti-government white supremacist organization called the Order. Obviously, to say it was pie in the sky would be an understatement. It was just a fucking stupid idea. Daniel Lee Lewis met Kehoe in 1995, and Kehoe recruited him into the APR. In January of 1996, Lee and Kehoe left the state of Washington and traveled to Arkansas, where they dressed in police raid clothing. They had the hats, the jackets, and they went to raid the home of William Mueller, a gun dealer near Tilly, who owned a huge collection of weapons and ammunition. Kehoe and his father robbed Mueller in February of 95. So 11 months before that, the father and son robbed this guy already. They got 15 grand. They both bought small pieces of land too, which to me, this that was just a weird, I'm not going to say a plot twist. That was just a weird little spin that happened. They actually purchased land with the money that they stole. Kind of a weird purchase, isn't that, Dylan?
A little bit.
So 11 months later, after the son and father robbed this guy, Lee and Kehoe robbed him. Okay. The Muellers weren't home when Lee and Kehoe arrived, so they waited for them. When the Muellers did return, Lee and Kehoe overpowered and incapacitated Mueller and his wife. They then questioned Nancy Mueller's 8-year-old daughter, Sarah Powell, about where they could find the cash, guns, and ammunition. After finding 50 grand in cash, they also stole guns and ammunition. They shot the victims each with a stun gun while they were incapacitated, placed plastic bags over their heads, sealed the plastic bags with duct tape. They took the victims in Kehoe's vehicle to the Illinois Bayou. They taped rocks to them and threw them in the bayou. The bodies were discovered in Lake Darnell near Russellville, Arkansas, late in June of 1996. Okay. Believe it or not, Kehoe and Lee returned to Spokane with the stolen property around January 14th of 1996. Kehoe traveled to several different states to sell the property at gun shows. He and Lee were apprehended by law enforcement in 1997 after some of the guns had been traced to Kehoe. Now, ironically enough, and here's another, we talked about, I don't remember what episode it was. We talked about the world's dumbest criminals. Do you remember what episode that was?
I
can't remember. I guess it's kind of irrelevant because these guys kind of fit the bill. They actually, almost a year later, still had the federal government raid jackets and hats in the vehicle they were driving. How dumb can you be?
Yeah, that's pretty stupid.
That's beyond stupid. You're a moron. You're just an idiot. Lee and Kehoe and several others were indicted December 12th of 1997. On January 5th of 1998, so about a month later, Lee appeared in court for his arraignment and was ordered detained until trial. A superseding indictment was filed, charging Lee with racketeering in violation of federal statutes. I'm not going to get into the specifics because it would be boring. He was also charged with murder in aid of racketeering in violation of a different statute, conspiracy to commit a robbery, and use of a firearm in violation of a felon. An indictment alleged that the APR was a RICO enterprise. For anybody that doesn't know what RICO is, it's racketeering. If huge drug dealers that trade drugs and money all over the world, they're generally charged with racketeering because it's a federal charge. It kind of is a catch-all. Anytime you money laundering, things like that, it's a RICO statute violation. It's a very, very powerful statute, though. It's super, super strong. It's generally used for criminal organizations. If they would have had the statute, someone like Al Capone would have been charged with RICO violations. Okay. Ironically enough, after a trial, Daniel Lewis was convicted, as he should have been, 100%. He was sentenced to death. The ringleader, who the government admitted was the ringleader, only sought life against Kehoe. So, Dylan, before we get too far into anything else, give me your initial thoughts here.
They should both be sentenced to death.
I could 100% agree with you there. But I would like somebody to try and explain to me why the ringleader that the government admitted was the ringleader, was only sentenced. They didn't even seek the death penalty. Any thoughts as to why that would be?
Unless he
he didn't testify against Lee. There was nothing like that. They just chose not to seek the death penalty.
They're odd.
It is very odd. There is some very, very strange inconsistencies in this case. There is some, and on direct appeal, very, very rarely do I read an appeal to where I go, before I say that, let me put it this way. I've read thousands of appeals. Dylan doesn't get too much into the appeals because I think it kind of bores him a little bit. I find it fascinating, but I also find it very tedious because almost every appeal, direct appeal, always claims a certain specific things. Ineffective assistance of counsel is by far the most popular. What that means is the appellant, the person convicted, is appealing their sentence, saying that their attorney screwed up somehow, that they didn't actually do the best of their ability. They didn't do their jobs. It's kind of a catch-all. I don't know that I've ever seen a direct appeal that didn't have that in there, because you're hoping that you can catch something that the attorney did or didn't do, and you kind of move from there. So that's the first thing that you always see. The second thing that you always see is generally when a defendant does not testify, the first thing they do is say that they were denied the opportunity to testify on their own behalf. It's another catch-all just because so many cases have, believe it or not, been thrown out when the defendant has not been given the chance to testify, which is why they now ask you in many, many cases, do you want to testify? And if you say no, they make sure that you understand that you are waiving your right to testify, because that is a direct violation of your due process. You are allowed to testify no matter what. There are a bunch of issues that were brought up here in his appeal that I think actually hold water. And Dylan, I want to kind of get your feelings on this. The government made it seem like when they were going through his sentencing, he had been arrested a bunch of times. There is no question to that. Okay, he's this guy, and again, for killing the two people, he did kill the mother and father. I believe he should be executed anyway. But there was a statement made. The whole reason he was given the death penalty is because of the murder of the underage child. That was the whole reason that the state said they decided to seek the death penalty. It was proven that when Kehoe wanted to kill the 8-year-old, told Lee to kill the 8-year-old, he absolutely refused to do it. He refused to kill a child. So Kehoe did. So problem number one I see with this case is that the fact that there's no way to connect him to the death of the child, which is their whole linchpin to the death sentence, is gone. I mean, am I getting that right, Dylan?
Yeah.
If you can't connect him to that, and as a matter of fact, he refused to kill that specific victim, how can you use that to make sure he gets a death sentence?
I don't really know. That doesn't really make that much sense.
Another big issue that came up at appeal was during the closing arguments, Lee was arrested as a teenager for a different murder. It turns out it was not him. Okay, but he was arrested. It was not him. The charges were dropped. There was never a trial. There was nothing. The prosecution during closing arguments made reference of his prior murder conviction. There was no murder conviction prior to this. If you watch any Law and Order, Criminal Minds, anything like that, that is a huge no-no. You cannot say something like that to the jury. There's a saying that once a bell is rung, it can't be unrung. What that means is that once a person hears something, they can never unhear it. Even if you tell them and the judge instructed the jury to disregard that comment, Dylan, if you're sitting on a jury trial for somebody up for murder, and the prosecution, who is the person you're supposed to trust, they're the good guys, right? Says that this guy was convicted of murder before, you're going to believe that.
Yeah.
Right? So even if the judge says, ignore that now after that, you can't tell me that that's not going to play, even in the back of your mind subconsciously, a huge factor. That's a second huge mix-up that they had. Another thing that you're seeing with this case, which again is very, very rare, the victim's families is telling the court that they messed up, that he shouldn't be executed. The victim's family, the grandmother, so the grandmother of the 8-year-old, the mother of the gentleman that was killed, Mr. Mueller, said that he should not be killed. The government admitted that Lee was not the ringleader, that Kehoe was. And the fact that you have the families the victim's family asking for clemency to a life sentence is a lot. I mean, there's a 6-minute video. Arlene Branch Peterson, who was the grandmother, asked President Trump to grant clemency for Daniel Lewis, who was scheduled to die. This was back December 9th. This was his first execution date. Okay. It's been that he was scheduled for January. It was then stayed until that was just set today, actually, for June the 13th. I'm sorry, for July the 13th. She is also joined by one of the survivor's children, Kim Aguirre, and her granddaughter, Monica Vallette, as well as the U.S. attorney who investigated and prosecuted the murders. So you have all the family of the victims and the U.S. attorney that prosecuted him saying he should get clemency. I can't think of another case where the actual U.S. attorney that prosecuted it
it's rare.
Joined with the victim's family to try to get somebody's sentence changed.
Well, I bet it's happened a couple times, but not that I know of.
I can't think of any case. Can you? Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a family here who deserves justice. Don't get me wrong. They 100% deserve justice. Okay. But the own family, the victim's family is saying, no, this isn't right. This he doesn't deserve this. No, they
both deserve it.
And again,
but one of them didn't get it.
Well, no. What I'm saying, though, is if they both didn't deserve it, he doesn't. If I agree. But in my eyes, if you're not going to execute the ringleader who killed the 8-year-old, you can't execute the other one legally.
Agreed.
You can't do that. I agree with you. They should both be executed. But if you're going to only execute one, it shouldn't be Lewis. It should be Kehoe. So this is a direct quote from her, from the grandmother. Quote, yes, Daniel Lewis damaged my life, but I can't believe taking his life is going to change any of that. I can't see how executing Daniel Lee will honor my daughter in any way. In fact, it's kind of like it dirties her name because she wouldn't want it. And
that's the issue. Is that doesn't sound like she's mad because that guy didn't get the execution. She sounds just mad because someone in general is getting executed. She doesn't seem, that quote did not seem like she was upset because the ringleader was not being executed. That quote made it seem upset that someone was being executed in general. Seems like she's just anti-death penalty.
Possibly. But again, the fact that the state made so many errors, you're talking about a case again, and there's been cases, a lot of cases, that have been overturned for minor technicalities. These issues that were presented in appeal were not minor technicalities. These are major flaws of the law. These are major legal arguments that, if you look at it from an honest perspective, if you take your feelings out of either side, those arguments hold water. They are very valid concerns. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? So there's actually even more evidence of where the state screwed up. And now keep this one in mind. Okay, this is from this is from Daniel Lee Lewis's mother. Okay, she claims that they labeled him. She didn't claim. They labeled him a dangerous psychopath who has the propensity to harm people if he's released. And I don't argue with that one bit. I really don't. But they said that he was deemed a, quote, dangerous psychopath due to, quote, junk science. A lot of people throw the term junk science around. It's generally used in regards to unproven theories, unproven conjecture that just kind of can play either side of the fence. It hasn't been proven, but a lot of prosecutors will use it because it sounds great for them. Okay. His lawyer, Morris Moon, that's a wild name, said in a statement that Lee's sentence was unconstitutional. The attorneys filed for a habeas petition on October 26th of 2019 and asked the court in Indiana, which does have the power to consider these claims because it's a federal charge, to overturn Lee's unconstitutional death sentence and prevent him from being executed because the label dangerous psychopath was used when, like I said, it was considered junk science now. The government, this is a direct quote from Mr. Moon, the government obtained a death sentence against Daniel Lee using junk science It promoted the fiction that Mr. Lee was a dangerous psychopath based on a forensic instrument that even the government's own trial expert now admits lacks any scientific validity. So again, here you have, they labeled him a dangerous psychopath. This was introduced as evidence at trial, saying that he will be violent in his future. The state's own doctor said that the science behind that diagnosis was garbage. It wasn't real. It wasn't legitimate. He was labeled a dangerous psychopath.
I'm not sure. It doesn't really make sense.
Science. How is this not being taken into account?
Yep.
I mean, and again, I think we both agree that if you're going to kill anybody, kill them both, right? I mean, that's not the argument here. Another direct quote from the attorney, that junk science was not only the false evidence the government used to secure a death sentence, it also misled the jury into believing that Mr. Lee had committed a prior murder as a juvenile, he said. The government's presentation about Mr. Lee's history of violence was not only highly inflammatory, it was also categorically false. Court records demonstrate that a state judge had actually dismissed the inflated murder charge against Mr. Lee after looking at the evidence. But again, here you go. You've got a prosecutor, and unfortunately, prosecutors get promoted on conviction rates. Even more unfortunately, it seems like a lot lately, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, Dylan, it seems like there's a lot lately that's been coming up or brought to light about very, very, I'm not going to say illegal, but questionable tactics used by not only police, but prosecutors have been coming under a lot of fire lately for doing and saying things they shouldn't do because they know they can get away with it. And this, obviously, this was 1999, so it was 21 years ago. But there's a lot here that the Supreme Court, I don't know that I can remember a case that is as tainted as this one, albeit again, he should get the death sentence just from killing the other two people in my eyes. But you can't kill him who refused to, by the state's own evidence, refused to kill the 8-year-old, but then used him killing the 8-year-old as a mitigating factor to give him the death sentence. It doesn't make any sense. And if this isn't a case to where that death sentence should be overturned to life,
right.
I don't know that you can find one. So, I mean, this is pretty blatant, isn't it? I mean, am I wrong? And again, we're not advocating this guy should get off. That's not even close to remotely in the realm of possibility.
Yeah,
what I'm saying completely. Is that they should definitely both be executed.
We talk about this a lot. There's a lot of systems mess up. There's
all right, Dylan, give me your final thoughts on this.
Both should be executed. I don't see the ruling being overturned, personally. But as I like to say, they're both human pieces of garbage.
I think we're going to have to get that on a shirt or a hat. Hashtag human piece of garbage. And again, I'm going to agree with Dylan here.
I would understand if the
both get executed or neither one.
But I don't understand why the side guy's being executed, but the ringleader's not.
That's 100%. Especially
maybe it'll get
overturned that the ringleader
they'll flip it, but I highly
killed the 8-year-old, which is what they used to convict Lee of the death sentence. Well, they can't flip it. I mean, the only thing they would be able to do is commute Lee to life. They can't increase the sentence for Kehoe. That's not legal. All right, guys, that's going to kind of bring us to the end of this episode. For myself, the Podfather, Richard Bystron, as well as my cohort, my right-hand man, my ace boom coon, Mr. DW. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon. And remember, guys, evil walks among us.